Hello and welcome to our October newsletter. The time is flying by. I think mainly due to the different cataclysmic events that are going on, whether they be nature-based, personal-based, global-based. We seem to be having something to deal with most months. And we're being impacted by that. All of us are being impacted by what we're seeing around us and how people are possibly being devastated, struggling, all sorts of things going on. So the year is tripping through quite quickly. And I suppose in reflection, in my newsletter, even just the title, Goodness Gracious Grief, we're having to deal with our own grief through the passing of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth. And it's been a really interesting time living in New Zealand. For some reason, people really connect to a person who comes from the UK, and I've been asked lots of questions about how I'm coping with my grief. How do I feel about the Queen passing? What are my thoughts about the Queen passing? And I found that I suppose I think I've found that has been quite a surprise to me, with just that link from coming from the UK and being in this outreach of the British Empire as it once was. Now it's part of the Commonwealth. But I suppose with the Queen's passing and her presence in our lives for such a long time, all of my lifetime, we have had the Queen, we've had to learn how to sing God Save the Queen, Rule Britannia, all of these amazing anthems that were linked to her energy, her presence, her sovereignty, her mystique almost. It has been difficult not to be impacted by her passing, by the collective grief globally, and also by my own personal grief, things that I thought I had come to terms with in my sense of loss have bubbled to the surface, and we're being challenged on how we're moving through our own grief process. I think in reflection, in looking at what had occurred at that time of her passing, not only the shocking inevitability of it, she was very royal through and through to the very end. She saw her duty through to her last breath. And I think although as a global nation, we knew her passing wouldn't be too far into the future because of her age, but actually being impacted by the news, the shock of that news, it just reverberated around the world like a shock wave, like a tidal wave. And each of us have been caught up in that tidal wave. We've been reminded of our own sense of loss. We have borne witness to the royal family and their sense of loss, very public. Not a lot of private time to just take stock of what that means for them. And I take my hat off to them to show such strength and courage and bravery in standing in front of the public eye globally, shaking lots of hands, accepting condolences, seeing and feeling that outpouring. You know, these are human beings, and I'm sure on an empathic level, they will have felt that association. And I think for us, we then reflect on their grief. Were we grieving for their grief? Were we tapping into their grief on that empathic level? And I've talked about empathic sympathy before in a previous newsletter, where we totally tune into what other people are feeling and how that then resides within our own selves. Like all things, grief brings us to a place where we reflect on our sense of loss, and we reflect on a mother figure, a mothering figure, whether she was your mother or not your mother, the grandparent, whether they were paternal grandparents or not paternal grandparents, but that sense of love and duty, that sense of support and protection. I think the Queen offered a huge amount of protection to the British public, to the royal family. She certainly would make her feelings known, and she offered protection to her own children, but also their extended families. And so I think for us, we are in a place where we are reflecting on possibly our sense of loss of a loved one who offered us the same role as the Queen offered everyone, limitlessly, graciously, and in her sovereignty. I think she portrayed a level of behaviour that would do well for people to reflect now, in her dignity, her commitment, her loyalty, her strength, her courage, just a whole variety of adjectives and superlatives that I just can't wrap my head around right now. But I think that all comes under the word sovereignty. So we need to look at ourselves. We need to look at how we handle our own grief. And are we handling our own grief? Are we in a place where we've transited through a sense of grief and we're in a place of complete acceptance? And I think for myself, I have several different tools that I use when a loved one passes away. And one of the tools that was taught to me by a gypsy, a Romany gypsy in the UK, he was an extraordinary medium from a well-known gypsy family in Scotland. And I went to see him in, would be my early 30s, I would think. And I was in a place of grief. I took a photograph along of a loved one. And he was always very blunt. I'd been to see this young chap many times. And he was exceptionally blunt, as a Glaswegian could be. And he sort of said, you've got to stop crying. This photograph is of your loved one, and they are smiling and they're laughing. You need to laugh and smile. You need to think about the joy that they did bring into your life, and not the sadness about them not being there, because you can't change that process. You can only reflect back on the love, the joy, the happiness, the companionship, that sense of safety. This particular person always made me feel safe. And what that meant for you, because the more you focus on that, then that's the vibration you bring in. You're bringing that person closer to you. And I've never forgotten that advice that he gave me, because from that moment in time, I thought, wow, okay, I will. When I lose someone, I'll think about those happy times. I'll smile and reflect. And the grief is still there, but it feels like a different type of grief. And it feels like I move through the grief process relatively smoothly. I'm not going to say easily, because there is no easy way to move through grief. There isn't. There's only your way. And really think about that. Think about your way. How would you find yourself moving through a sense of grief at the loss of someone? What has also came to the forefront for me in reflecting on the Queen's passing, reflecting on challenges, reflecting on where we've been, is that I've suddenly come to terms with the grief and the loss through the September quakes. And for many people, it was the February quakes. And yes, I lost 17 colleagues in the February quakes, but actually our family were devastated in the September quakes. That's when we lost our reality. It just didn't exist anymore. Everything that we'd worked towards, created, produced, manufactured, and our identity within the local community was gone. It was gone in that 30 seconds of shaking. And I suppose for many years, I've always described us as in quake recovery. And it's only through reflecting at the sense of loss of the Queen, through reflecting on where we've been, that I've suddenly realised that I no longer describe our business as a quake recovery business. We're just in business. And so that's a wonderful, wonderful signal to myself that me, I've moved through my grief process now, and we're just in business. And I can reflect back on those wonderful colleagues. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day about Murray, who was the managing director, CEO of CTV here in Christchurch, Canterbury Television, and his vision and his complete and utter understanding of the digital world, and how he would come and see me in the green room before my slot, my weekly slot, and say, "What's in the stars for me, Phyllis?" And we'd have this lovely rapport and repartee about what the stars could and may not hold for him. And he was just this wonderful, larger than life character. And I was describing him and talking about him, and I suddenly realized I was reflecting on those happy moments, those moments where he would come in and give me a bit of a ribbing on what I was going to be talking about in front of the camera with Megan or Andrea. So that process of talking, that process of reflecting, that process of Queen Elizabeth II's passing, and what that's brought up for you as an individual. It's not about being a royalist. It's not about being, an advocate for Queen Elizabeth and what she stood for. It's actually just about yourself. And it's about that reflection of who you are as a person, that reflection of how that impacted you, that reflection of where you've come from on your journey, and how you're going to carry that forward, how you're going to bring those memories of those loved ones into a happy place that makes your journey through grief just a little bit less stressful. So goodness gracious, grief is our topic today. And I think, yes, I think in her passing, I think we've all had time to reflect on a grief process that we have had happen in our lives. Here at Opus Soul, we are continuing our journey through the Mandala meditations. And remember, you can join just on an individual basis, just book in for a meditation. In November, we are having our connection to our soul family. So we're going to be talking about the monad, about the 12 aspects of the monad, the 12 aspects of your higher self, and how that all links into your past lives, your conscious continuum, as we call it in Buddhism. And you'll be meeting your monad and your circle of 12. So I'm very excited about this particular one because it's ascension work. And ascension work is where our soul needs to be. Our soul is constantly looking to improve, evolve, change, magnify what we've learned in this conscious continuum here and now, but in previous conscious continuums, and how that makes us the best version of ourselves. So I'm really excited about this one. So you're more than welcome to join us just for this one session if you're interested in ascension at all. And the link is in the newsletter. So I'm really, really excited with this one. My ebooks, thank you to the lovely people who are out there purchasing the ebooks. They give you just a little taster of what the full courses are. And a big thank you to everyone who has been buying the online courses. I would also like to thank the team at Insight Timer. I've been with Insight Timer since 2006, which is a long, long time. And it was owned by a couple of gentlemen back then, bought over by a large conglomerate, by Apple. In fact, they bought the platform, and I became part of the beta testing group with them. And we're testing different products in different ways. Obviously, Apple want to monetize everything. And for a long while, as a simple, unrecognizable teacher, except to my wonderful fan base, you guys, we weren't allowed to put any more product on the Insight Timer platform. They certainly gave room to the more well-known stars out there. But I was approached in July this year to create a course for Insight Timer, which I have done. And it's a variation of mindful manifesting. It's called Conscious Manifesting, and it's an audio course because being Apple, they are an audio-based organization. So it would be great to see you as part of the Insight Timer database. I have lots of followers on, in fact, 1,300 or 1,400 followers on there. I've had 34,000 downloads of my products on Insight Timer, which is just spectacular. And so thank you to everyone on Insight Timer who have been supporting me since 2006. It's been very much appreciated, I can assure you. So if you want to participate in an audio course, there's some questions. You can ask me questions. I'll answer those questions all within Insight Timer. I'd be delighted to see you there. So I'll put the link in our newsletter as well. So I hope I've given you something to think about in terms of goodness, gracious grief. Grief is a good thing. You can transit through it graciously. You can think differently about your loved ones and put them into perspective of joy and happiness. And that will just help ease the tension or the pain of their loss. So until the next time, take care of yourselves, be kind to yourselves, be good to yourselves. And we'll see you here in the Phyllis Brown newsletter. Until then, take care for now. Bye.